Joining us now, Semaphore political reporter Dave Weigel and Democratic strategist and MSNBC political analyst Basil Smikle. Ashley Parker still with us. Dave, if Curtis and if Mayor Adams are no longer in the race, does Cuomo have a shot?
He has a better shot for the Sliwa situation more than the than the Adams situation. Adams has been terribly unpopular. You talk to Democrats running other campaigns. No matter what his record is, voters think he's a joke. They think he's controlled by Trump already. So you're talking about a small migration of votes from Adams to Cuomo and to Sliwa. If Sliwa drops out, and this is much less likely given how Sliwa talks about it, would that vote migrate to Cuomo? You were asking Republicans in a break glass scenario to vote for their arch nemesis for more than a decade in New York. It is a real dilemma for people who want Mamdani to lose. Mamdani's trying to use this in the meantime to consolidate Democrats because you look at the electorate, as much as it swung towards Trump last year, this is a Democratic city and a Democratic electorate that does not want to do Trump's bidding.
I can't imagine Curtis Sliwa leaving New York for anything.
Yeah, I can't either. And I think it was absolutely right. What Mamdani has said is Donald Trump is clearly not doing everything he can to make sure the Democrat doesn't win. And that's all you need to know. And Cuomo himself has said, or the reports are that Cuomo himself has said at a Hamptons fundraiser that there was help coming from Donald Trump.
Is that weird to you?
And of course it's weird. This is an unprecedented moment in time that you had only the second African American mayor in the history of the city of New York, which is in and of itself stunning. Polling at roughly 8% right now, closely tied, according to the voters, and certainly given his history, to Donald Trump. Not even potentially standing up for re-election, and that this Republican president is doing what he can to help Andrew Cuomo become mayor.
I mean, they butted heads so fiercely when Donald Trump was president and Cuomo was still governor here, especially during the pandemic. What I'm struggling to understand here is the motivation of Donald Trump, Ashley. Wouldn't he want the Mamdani factor as a foil? Wouldn't that be something that he would use to his advantage to try to campaign on? I mean, he's calling him a communist. What is the motivation for not wanting Mamdani to be mayor?
So there's plenty of Republicans who are already using Mamdani as a foil and would absolutely love to use him as a foil heading into 2026. With Donald Trump, it's a little more complicated, even though he has moved his residence now to Florida. He is a New Yorker through and through. He still cares about how, the mayor's policies, whoever the next mayor is, would affect New York businesses. He also has a lot of friends who are New York businessmen, and he's hearing from them, and they don't want Mamdani. They're not worried about using Mamdani to, boost a House Republicans' chances in 2026. They care about their city and their businesses, and they believe that those policies would not benefit them. And so I think that at least begins to explain this sort of unlikely meddling we are seeing from the Republican president.
I think that is an interesting wrinkle in it because of the business interests and also who might be whispering in Donald Trump's ear. Dave, you have some interesting reporting on what Mamdani is being allowed to do by the progressives. They're giving him a little bit more space. Explain that.
Yeah, so much of the Cuomo campaign is about what Mamdani has said in the past, in the recent past, in 2020, in 2021, his history with Democratic Socialists of America and the positions of Democratic Socialists of America. And if you talk to New York DSA, as I did, they do not demand that Mamdani stick to the platform of the national organization. Mamdani has said, for example, abolishing prison. That's in the DSA's platform from 4 years ago. That's not his position. You are not seeing people on the left, Democratic Socialists, step down any of their organizing. And for context, DSA did unendorse AOC over not working hard enough in their view to stop funding Israel. They were giving a lot of berth for Mamdani because they, one, trust him. Not that he's going to reverse himself in office. They just trust him as an organizer. Two, they want to win. And three, in this conversation, every day that Donald Trump is intervening in the race and Cuomo's intervening, it negatively polarizes the left. And they are clung more even strongly to Mamdani, ready to defend him even more strongly.
And it's interesting. That is an example of the left learning a lesson that maybe they did get too extreme and they did turn off what were otherwise Democratic voters?
Well, issue purity in the past was seen as a problem. And look, progressives have won legislative seats all throughout New York City and New York State. So having somebody become mayor of the city of New York is a real jewel in the crown. And it is true that there are a lot of business leaders that viewed Eric Adams and perhaps now Andrew Cuomo as that firewall against more progressive politics. So as one leader had said in the past, how can you have a socialist be mayor of the capital of capitalism? And the truth is, the role will moderate you, and I think that's what progressives are saying.
Well, he also doesn't have all that much power over a lot of things. He's got a lot of power over schools, the mayor does in New York City, and a lot of power over the police. And I wonder, Dave, what is the messaging you're hearing on what he is going to be able to, if he wants to, on policing? Would he keep a Jessica Tisch? Would he continue to fund the NYPD, continue to fund the efforts to lessen crime? And I mean, we were going through some wild violent crime statistics here in New York. I mean, wild in the sense that they've been lower than they've been in years. There was the lowest murder rate, I think, in decades for the first half of this year.
And there's a little irony there. He'd inherit that from Mayor Adams. He'd inherit that from Jessica Tisch. You're right. He's not committed to keeping Tisch. But again, the left is not demanding get rid of her, replace her with somebody who agrees with us. They're giving him that space, as we were discussing. And he has said he does not want to defund the police. He's recanted what he said in 2020 about that. He'd be working with a governor in Albany who is going to be running for re-election and would not sign off on that. He's talked about paying police more. He's talked about supplementing the police with a public safety department. And he's done a lot of studying mayors and progressives in other cities, how they approach this. The model he has in mind is not demolition of the New York security system. It is Michelle Wu in Boston. It is Bernie Sanders in Vermont decades ago. He wants to prove that you can be a left-wing socialist mayor and have safety and have cheaper housing. Now, that's happy campaign rhetoric, but that is how he's gotten past some of the statements he made in the past about defunding. He just says he will not do it. He's interested in safety, not defunding.